Hello, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we are going to be talking about three more things that I do when I am prepping for my first draft. So, these are things that I usually do during the outlining process. As I teased in the previous episode, I do have a bonus fourth thing. So, make sure you stay tuned until the end to hear what that is. I have really found that outlines only work for me if I do a lot of groundwork before I get into the first draft. I can't just write a quick outline and move on to writing. It does not work for me. In the last episode, I shared the first three steps that I always take before writing a story. And today I'm continuing with a few more practices that help me prepare to actually outline. I know this feels like a lot of pre-work for the pre-work of writing, but I find it super helpful. It clarifies a lot of stuff. So, like I said, I will be sharing a bonus step. This is something that I have just started experimenting with, so I don't know that I necessarily am going to continue doing it. I've liked it this time, so I may try it again next time, but who knows? And of course, just like with the last episode, I'm going to show you how all of these practices that I'm doing connect to my current project, along with what's working, what's not working, and what I'm still figuring out. Welcome to the Fiction Refinery podcast. I'm Jennifer, a writer and developmental editor, and I'm here to share my writing process as I work on the first book that I intend to publish. I'm going to be sharing the lessons that I'm learning along the way and the insights that we can borrow from best-selling books and fellow writers. Grab your favorite hot beverage and let's dive into today's episode. So just for a quick recap of the previous episode, and honestly, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, I would go start there at the very least. You could start with episode 1 because this is episode number 3, so we're not that far in. You can catch up. But if you are just starting with this one, I highly recommend to go back to at least the last one because this is a process. It is a streamlined process. I start with one and I go through these steps in order. So I think it would probably make most logical sense to follow it in the order in which I actually do it. That's why I'm sharing it in this order, because everything kind of builds on each other. But for a quick recap, in the last episode, I talked about how I establish my story idea, how I create the story premise, and then how I get all of my ideas onto paper. So where we left off in the last episode is I get all of my ideas onto paper. I ask questions, I answer those questions with every single possible answer I can think of, even if the answer is totally crap or something else would have to be true about the world in order for that answer to make sense. I don't care, I'm writing it down. Once I have done that, it's time for me to start choosing the answers that I think will work best and make the most logical sense in the story. I might highlight them, but I typically just restate them and make a note that this is the direction I intend to go in. Honestly, this makes the brainstorming process a little bit messy because I have to go through and read it again later so that I can pick out the ideas that I chose to move forward with. Because of this, I highly recommend highlighting the ones that you want to move forward with because visually they'll just jump out at you and it'll make it a lot easier. However, if you're anything like me and somehow writing it again feels cathartic, then by all means, do whatever you gotta do. Even if you write it again like I do, maybe going through and highlighting those would make it easiest. But I digress. Now, just to make sure that I'm being clear, I make the best choices I think I can with all of the information that I have so far. Absolutely none of this is set in stone, and the likelihood that I'm going to change my mind on some of these things is rather high. So I don't want you to feel like you're locking yourself into something because I don't allow myself to feel like I'm locking myself into something. I can consider these directions, and if I don't like one of them or one of them doesn't really work for something else that I would rather do, I get rid of it. That's it. Super simple. And this is why I think that working and doing all this pre-work for the outline is so helpful, because you really get a chance to explore a ton of different directions, a ton of different options. And it's very creative, it's very fun, and it ultimately helps me create more confidence in my choices. So once I finally get to the outline, I feel very comfortable that I don't really want to make any changes. Like, I feel really confident and comfortable with my outline, at least for the first draft. During revisions, it's whatever it might be. Things come to light when you've written your first draft, and that's perfectly fine. That's what's supposed to happen. So next, I move on to brainstorming potential character arcs. Yes, that's right, but we're not done brainstorming yet. So I brainstorm potential character arcs for the protagonist and the love interest in this story. If you are writing a different story and you don't have a love interest or something like that, then obviously you would not brainstorm a character arc for that character that does not exist. But you will have to choose who you think should have a character arc. I'm not going to say that this is right or wrong. I'm just going to share what I do when I'm choosing characters who will receive a character arc. I really choose characters who will receive a character arc based on their importance to the story. So the protagonist, that is a must-have. Your protagonist has to have a character arc, even if it's a flat arc, although I would be very careful with that unless you're writing something episodic. Like, a flat character arc is not always enjoyable for a protagonist. That being said, after the protagonist, I consider who else is really important. So the romantic subplot in this story is super important, and I do plan on including the love interest's point of view. Because of that, I would like him to have a character arc. I think it would be beneficial. I feel like if you're taking the time to get into somebody's head, it is nice to be able to see a change in them. And we also know that in order for them to come together, he's probably going to have to change somewhat, because this is an enemies to lovers story. So something's going to have to change for him. To me, it makes a lot of sense to give him a character arc. I do plan on tying his character arc to his external goal, along with, and also tying it to the romantic subplot. I'm doing the same thing with the protagonist. So we're really focusing on one change, like one major internal shift, but that internal shift has a ripple effect, if you will. So that's what I'm thinking right now. For me, those are the two characters who are going to have character arcs. I'm just going to say this. Developmental editor Jen is popping in for a visit. But I just want to say, be careful who all you give character arcs to. Do not give them to all of your characters. Do not give them to most of your characters. You will run into things getting really muddy. I would not even give them necessarily to every single person who has a point of view. If you are doing like 8 points of view, which honestly is a lot, and I would ask if all of them are really necessary. But I digress. If somebody has a point of view, but they have like 3 scenes, probably not worth including a character arc for them. They should have a goal, motivation, all of that, but a character arc is going to be a lot, because each character arc you add is basically a subplot. So be careful with how many that you add, because you'll overcomplicate your story super quickly. And when you overcomplicate your story, things get a little bit messy. And when things get messy, readers get confused and bored, and they put the book down. So keep it simple. While I'm brainstorming, that was a huge tangent, I'm so sorry. While I'm brainstorming potential character arcs for my characters, I just write down absolutely all of my ideas. I have general character arc structures in the back of my mind. So I know if it's going to be a positive change arc or if it's going to be oh gosh, I always forget the name of this one, and it's literally one of my favorite arcs. I love it so much. Oh my gosh, what is it called? There we go. There we go. So I usually have in the back of my mind if I'm going to choose a positive change arc, a fall arc, a corruption arc, not often, or here's my favorite, a disillusionment arc. I love that one. Just so you have an idea of what it is, there's this lie that they believe, it's the misbelief. They go on a journey, the truth is revealed and accepted, but the truth is tragic. And oh my God, that's just so good. I love that one. Now, considering the types of stories that I write, my protagonists usually do not have a disillusionment arc. However, I have seen opportunities to do a disillusionment arc with a love interest, and it's really good. I love it. Anyways, I keep those in mind. So generally, I have an idea of the direction I want the change to go in, whether it's positive or negative. I just start writing down absolutely all of my ideas. I usually start with what they would need to believe about themselves or the world in order for them to achieve their goal. For the protagonist, this would be the main story goal, which is stated in the premise. So I decide whatever makes the most sense for the story I'm telling. For example, in the story that I'm working on right now, I decided on this for the protagonist's character arc. The lie or misbelief is my external circumstances dictate what's possible for me. And the truth is that my choices dictate what's possible for me. I do not know if I will stick with this, but this is what I'm working with right now. And even though it's not easy, I make a decision so that I can continue exploring my options. Because ultimately, if I do not decide, I cannot make adjustments. This is what I'm working with right now. I like this because it leans into the theme that I'm working with. It leans into the romantic subplot that I am working on. And obviously, of course, because I crafted a main plot in mind. And just so that there is total clarity, this is a positive change arc. Something I just want to talk about super quick is, while we're on character arcs, is that K.M. Weiland, she did a blog post or podcast about this a number of years ago, but it is that there are two different types of lies that your character can believe. One is an inner lie and one is an outer lie. And there's a lot of overlap on these. And I think it's very interesting, and it's gotten me thinking about whether or not there should be both. At the end, in the conclusion, she says that either or could be fine. But of course, both is an option. And so I've been toying with that. I think that the lie or misbelief that I have created for the protagonist is more of an inner lie. It's more about how she experiences the world more so than the outer world itself. It's about her agency and what's possible for her. And because of that, I think that it's more eternal. So I am going to consider what outer lie could be linked to this inner lie. I don't have it just yet, but I am considering that because that might be worth exploring as an option for the story, is having both that inner and outer. And of course, if I can link them, I think that would be great. Misbeliefs are kind of one of those things that the best misbeliefs are the ones that we don't know are a belief because we never think to question them. This is not, what we're doing here is not unique to characters. People do this all the time. We have certain beliefs about the world, about ourselves. And while we see them as being truths, they are ultimately just beliefs. Okay, that was another little tangent for you. Next, in the process, I determine the story's working theme. Wow, I talked about theme before I even got to theme. That's so funny. I said it when we were doing the misbelief when we were doing the character arc that it tied into the theme, but you did not know. But I hadn't actually done it yet. In retrospect, obviously I know what the theme is, but I had not decided the theme until after, so that's really funny. But that is one of the reasons I like it, because it does tie in. Okay, so next in the process, I determined the story's working theme. So I say working because, of course, it might change. In fact, it probably will. I find theme to be often a bit elusive. It's not something that's easy for me to nail down. And honestly, for a while, I really struggled with what theme was. So let's talk about what theme is. So theme is the question that the story explores through characters, conflicts, and outcomes. So theme is what pretty much every part of the story should really come back to. Theme needs to be supported by character arcs, main plot, and subplots. Everything in the story should some way support the theme. Because of this, I really tend to create my theme after my main story goal and the character arcs. But honestly, you can start with theme if you wanted to. So if there was like a specific theme or idea that you want to explore, you can start with that. I just typically don't start with that. But of course, everybody is different. So here is my story's working theme. Are we bound by fate, or do we forge our own path? So you should be able to see now how the protagonist's change, the protagonist's character arc, ties into the main plot. And if we go back, we can pull up the story goal. So the story goal is Marin must find a way to get to the capital and help her sister escape prison. Otherwise, her sister will be executed. So on the surface, this doesn't necessarily sound like it ties into the theme, but it is absolutely going to tie into the theme. It is Marin's fault that her sister is taken. At least it appears that it's her fault that her sister is taken and arrested. And because of that, Marin is really going to be struggling with reconciling with that, because nobody wants it to be their fault. It's something external. It's all of these external things, but she's going to have to come to the realization that her actions, her choices, those things have consequences. And those consequences that she ultimately will have to deal with. And as much that is in the outside world that we have no control over, you always have control over yourself. That's how I'm thinking that the main plot is going to be tying in to the theme. It also ties in to the romantic subplot because we have a marriage of convenience. So it feels pretty forced by both parties. Like there's something that they're running from and they choose this as an option to get out of it. The marriage is going to feel pretty forced. And it really is going to ask the question, is love something that is fated, or is love a choice? And so that's where it ties back into the theme there. Honestly, I mean, as I continue establishing parameters for the story, the theme might have to change, or how different plot lines interact with the theme might have to change. It's really difficult to change any one thing without impacting other plot lines. It's why good storytelling is honestly so difficult to do. It's hard to bring everything together and make it cohesive, make it logical. It's difficult. And as readers, we demand something of fiction that we don't demand from real life. And we demand that it has to make sense. And that's because life often feels like it doesn't make sense. And so the fiction must. People like things that they can comprehend, understand, and it has to make sense in order for that to happen. You take a sip of my coffee here, and then we can move on to the bonus. So this is a bonus item. This is something that I have recently started doing. Normally, after I had gotten all of that figured out, I would have gone ahead and started outlining. But now I've started doing something. I saw another writer do this on YouTube, and I honestly forget who I saw do it. So I apologize. But I decided to give it a try because as I mentioned before, I've always felt like my brainstorming is super messy, and it's not something that I tend to go back to just because it's so messy. I have to read through everything, and I dislike that. So I thought I'd give this a try. And basically, I'm organizing all of my ideas around acts and characters. And I'm doing this using a mind map. And I've really enjoyed it so far. So I think this is something I'm going to continue doing at least for my next project or two. And we'll just see how it goes. Personally, I'm using whimsical.com to do this. It's free if it's just you. And I find their mind mapping tool to be very intuitive and helpful. It's exactly what I need, and it's easy. So once I have all of my brainstorming done, I'm basically just going into Whimsical, and I'm adding little mind maps for Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and for my two main characters, so my protagonist and the love interest. And then I'm taking all of my ideas for my brainstorming, and I'm just plugging them in. And these are all the ideas I want to keep, not necessarily all the ideas that I came up with, but all the ideas that I want to keep that I think I want to incorporate into the story. I'm taking those and I'm just adding them to the respective act that they're going to show up in, or the character that they're going to be related to. And if it is something that is going to be both related to a character and in an act, I will put it on both, just so that I have it wherever it is that I'm looking for it. I have a good grasp on general story structure. Personally, I use 5 key plot points. I use these when I'm editing. I use these in my own work. I think that they set a fantastic foundation. And honestly, regardless of what you plotted with, you can usually find these 5 key plot points. And if you can't find these 5 key plot points, you probably need to make some adjustments just because they are so foundational to story. So I know where each of these plot points is located, what act they're found in. And I also know what is kind of expected to happen around these plot points. I use this knowledge as a guide for what ideas to put in each act. And if I'm not sure where I might want something to go, I'll add it to 2 acts. And the great news is that nothing needs to stay where I put it. I can always move or delete it if it ends up making sense. And doing this just helps me because when I begin outlining, it's nice to see the organized list of all of my ideas for the story. And it gives me a pool of ideas to choose from. And it ensures that I don't forget anything important. And this was a big thing for me when I just had the big, long stream of conscious written brainstorming. I would forget things. I would not want to go back and look for anything. And so I was still I've written it down, but I was still relying on my memory for a lot of it. Because of that, I really have been enjoying this. I have a beautiful map that I can go to. I can take a look at everything. I can pull out what I decide that I want as I'm moving into outlining. And honestly, that is the last step for me. So once that's done, I feel ready to begin establishing loose outlines for the main plot and the romantic subplot, which is what we're going to be talking about in the next episode. And I'm very excited to share with you what I'm thinking of for the main plot and the romantic subplot. So I'm super curious, now that I've shared my non-negotiables, what are your non-negotiables before you start outlining? What do you absolutely need to have established prior to outlining? Let me know in the comments or send me a DM on Instagram. You can find me over there at Jen Floden. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Fiction Refinery podcast. Writing does not have to be a solitary journey. We are in this together. And if today's episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you subscribed and shared it with another writer who might need it. And as always, if you want more content like this, then be sure to subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, happy writing.